This is the journey to one Africa.
Within the time that we've got together, I know that when it comes to even the constitution of the EFF, socialism becomes a theoretical ideology as well as on the character of the EFF. Socialism obviously finds itself as well within some of the leaders within the 1950s and 60s, you know, Julius, Kwame Nkrumah and the like, right? And they were even speaking about the notion of African socialism as a founding principle. Socialism, however, in many instances has been a failure. Soviet Union, Nazi Germany, for example, they failed under socialism. And if you look at, for example, I think it's Algeria, Egypt even tried the socialist approach and it failed. How then does socialism find practical expression within a South African context with the realities that we're currently facing?
Well, its failure in Germany and in the Soviet Union does not mean automatically it will fail, because it succeeded in Cuba, it's succeeding in China. And Kwame Nkrumah and them, when they were speaking about African socialism, they simply meant socialism with African characteristics, that the principles of socialism which are applicable where we are will apply them to the best of our ability. And therefore we know that socialism, once given an opportunity, it will succeed. China today is one of the best economy run by a socialist state, led by the Communist Party of China. So we can't say socialism therefore failed in one or two countries and create an impression that capitalism has succeeded. Because all of Africa, capitalism has not succeeded. It's a complete failure. We are in this mess because of a capitalist state. And why not give an alternative economic system an opportunity to see if it will fail the same way capitalism failed? Capitalism failed Africa. All the ills that we have today is because of the greediness that was introduced into our continent by capitalists who came and exploited our resources and caused all of these problems.
Though I hear you with that, socialism as well, I'm not saying capitalism is at all correct.
Yes.
Because we're currently living in the most unequal society in the world because of capitalism. However, in that, for example, if you look at what happened before the coup in Ghana, where we had about 17 of state-owned enterprises out of the 64 in Ghana just before the coup, where they were working, only 17 of them were just working. And that expression finds itself because socialism also assumes that human beings are inherently not selfish, which is not true. The reason why we have some being more equal than others, even though we're all equal, is because human beings are inherently selfish. And sometimes socialism may be used to express, especially by the greedy, the notion of equality, but without practically applying equality. It says, it assumes that people will do the good for the betterment of mankind. And you and I know this is not so. We live in a country where we could have had it, but we did not have it, because human beings are inherently selfish. So how do you remove human nature from the concept and the ideology of socialism?
It's not true that human beings are inherently selfish. We are not born like that. We are produced by a capitalist system to be selfish. Because when we are born, we are the most caring, we are the most sharing people. If you look at kids from birth, they share. They always embrace each other. They are very peaceful people. Then get corrupted as they grow up by a capitalist system that creates an impression that if this one doesn't know and then you become number one at school, it means you're the best. And that's why we now get to be taught to compete amongst ourselves. The earlier primitive society lived together. They survived through hunting. They survived through gathering. They survived through fishing. They did that as a collective and then were able to share before the capitalist system of greedy was introduced to us. It's not correct that. So when you say to people, let's go back to who we are, you're not asking them to do the most difficult thing. We are made in this image because we are made out of the image of our colonizers. We are made out of the image of those who control the means of production. They tell us what is right and what is wrong. But in a socialist state, look at the Cubans. If the Cubans were not under the illegal economic embargo imposed on them by Americans for more than 60 years, that country would have been the best of the best. Then they imposed embargo on them because they ideologically disagree with them. A country that produces doctors at the most expensive field of education in our country, they do it there for free of charge. They live in an equal society where people are not driven by greed, but the ability to share and allow the state to develop the productive forces where wealth should be created and labor should be distributed according to the capacity of every individual that is found in society. So we want that type of society. And this can be done by introducing a new morals, new culture, which gets to be inculcated in how we get to be brought up. It is possible. So we are not inherently selfish.
So you're saying that we learned.
We're being taught. It's like racism. The white child never gets born to hate black kids. If you bring a new child of a white person here and you bring a new born black person here, they are going to embrace each other and love each other until their parents start telling them, be careful around those people.
But then does that not mean that a complete overhaul of the current leadership and the current system? And I say this because post-colonialism, right? If it takes about 150 years or so to oppress a person, even you've got the likes of Frantz Fanon that speaks exactly about psychological colonization, right? Frantz Fanon speaks about psychological colonization. Our leaders spent about 27 or so years in jail. You can imagine the atrocities that were experienced in that. Our post-democracy or even post-democracy or post-apartheid leaders are still to a large extent holding on to some kind of ideologies that still keep the apartheid concept alive. So in order for us to have that society that you speak of where people are inherently good, where it's talking about the building of South Africa in itself, does that not mean a complete overhaul? How do you, because you have to deconstruct a colonized mind. How do you deconstruct a colonized mind from somebody who's 70-something years old?
Well, the revolution means exactly that. There will never be a revolution if there is no complete overhaul. And there was no complete overhaul in 1994. It was just swapping of seats. There was a complete change of mindset, of getting rid of institutionalized exclusion of black people. And that's why the system remains intact to the exclusion of the majority. So we want a complete overhaul that will necessitate the liberation of the mind. The 76-year-olds don't have a problem. They will all do what we want to do as the younger generation, because they too know that we can only be guided by the younger ones. We lived our days. So when you look at what the leadership did when they came into the country, they actually continued with the management of the affairs on behalf of the colonizer and never engaged in any form of changing any mindset or changing any system. So the revolution means a complete destruction of an existing system and replace it with a socialist system that will now usher in a new culture altogether.